The room is for my parents now. You can sleep in the living room, Diane. My room, I answered curtly. In my own house. Hope crossed her arms. It's already decided. I already told them yes. You've always been so understanding. It won't be a problem. I took a deep breath. You offered up my room without asking me. You dictated my life over the phone. And on top of that, you tried to silence me by calling me understanding. David came in trying to make the peace he never managed to keep. Mom, don't be angry. It's just temporary. They have nowhere else to go. Is my respect also temporary, son? I shot back. Since when did having an opinion in my own house become a drama? Hope took a step toward me. If you don't like it, you'll just have to put up with it. I'm in charge of the arrangements. No, Hope. You are not in charge of anything, I replied, my voice firm. Today I am in charge of setting boundaries. The dish towel fell from my hand. I straightened my shoulders. Sit down, David. Sit down, Hope. You are going to listen and you are not going to forget it. What came out of my mouth from that moment on turned this house upside down. I turned 70 last week, and I never thought the day would come when my own daughter-in-law would tell me that my room no longer belonged to me, in the house that I built with my own 2 hands. I was tidying up the kitchen after lunch when I heard Hope talking on the phone with an excitement I hadn't seen in her for a long time. I pretended to be busy washing dishes, but every word she said made my heart grow tighter. Yes, Mom, you can bring everything. Diane won't mind. She's really cool with these things. You can stay in her bedroom. She'll sleep in the living room. I felt the air leave my lungs. What do you mean? Her bedroom. It was my bedroom. In my house. But I kept pretending not to listen like I always do when I don't want to cause problems in this family that I love so much. What hurt my heart the most was how casually Hope spoke about my life as if I were a rag doll she could move from one place to another without asking me anything. Oh, Diane loves having visitors in the house. You'll see how happy she'll be. A lie. Nobody has ever asked me if I'm happy. Nobody ever asks what Diane wants. Ever since my son got married, it seems I've become part of the furniture in this house, a house I built brick by brick when I was young. When Hope hung up the phone, she came into the kitchen with a smile that looked forced. Diane. I have great news. My parents are coming to stay with us for a few days. Isn't that great? I looked at her, trying to process what had just happened. A few days. On the phone, she had spoken as if it were permanent. And why didn't she consult me first? This has always been my house, even after they came to live here when they got married. But as always, I just smiled and said, "Of course, dear. When do they arrive?" Hope seemed relieved by my automatic usual response. "Tomorrow afternoon. It's so good that you understand, Diane. You've always been so understanding." But what they didn't know was that everything was about to change. I couldn't sleep a wink that night. I stayed awake, turning the whole situation over and over in my head. I couldn't understand how Hope had the nerve to make a decision like that without even consulting me. I got up early and went to make coffee, trying to gather my thoughts. That's when David appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas, and said to me as if it were nothing, "Mom, you can sleep in the living room, right? It's just for a few days." A few days. Everyone said, "A few days." But I know Hope, and I know that when she says a few days, it can mean a few months, or even longer. I remembered all the times I had set my own things aside to please this family. When they got married, I gave them half of my house. When my granddaughter Grace was born, I turned my sewing room into a nursery for the baby. When Hope wanted to remodel the kitchen, I agreed to lose the little corner where I kept my plants. And now they wanted me to give them my own bedroom, my refuge, the only space that was still truly mine. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, and a tear escaped. "Dear God," I murmured softly, "how long am I going to accept being treated like this in my own home?" David didn't even notice my state. He was busy checking his phone, probably working as always. Ever since he was little, my son was like that, very focused on his own things, but a little distracted when it came to the feelings of others. Hope entered the kitchen, all dressed up, smelling of perfume, and announced, "Diane, I'm going out to buy a few things for when my parents arrive. Can you get your room ready?" "Thanks." And she left, without even waiting for my answer. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. The previous days had been an emotional roller coaster. Hope had been more attentive to me than usual, asking me how I felt, if I needed anything, if I wanted to go to the market with her. At first I thought she was finally trying to get closer to me, that maybe she had understood that I also had feelings and needs. How naive I was. Now I realized that all that kindness was because she was already planning to ask me to give up my bedroom. She had been softening me up so that when the time came I would say yes without protesting. Like I always do, like the good mother-in-law I have always tried to be. I remembered when David was little, and he would ask me why his grandmother always gave in to his grandfather on everything. I used to tell him that's how women were back then, that we learned to be accommodating, to not create problems, to maintain family peace at the cost of our own desires. I never thought I would be living that same situation in my own house with my own family. I got up from the table and went to look at my bedroom. The photos of my late mother on the nightstand, the crucifix she gave me before she died, the bedspread that I embroidered myself during the long winters when David was a baby. All of it had history, it had value, it had my soul, and they wanted me to just get out of there to make room for people who don't even know me that well. Hope returned from the market loaded with bags. She brought everything. Special food flowers for decoration, even new towels for the bathroom. She looked excited like a child at Christmas. But when she saw me standing in the doorway of my bedroom, her expression changed. "Diane, have you started moving your things out yet?" She asked me with that sweet but firm voice she uses when she wants to get something. "Hope," I said, "we need to talk." Her face changed. I think for the first time in 2 years of living together, there was something in my tone of voice she had never heard before. "Talk about what my parents will be here in a few hours." Exactly that they'll be here in a few hours, and I knew nothing about it until yesterday. Hope dropped the grocery bags on the kitchen table and turned to look at me with that expression she gets when she thinks someone is being ridiculous. "Oh, Diane, I told you yesterday, and you said it was fine. You told me they were coming. You didn't ask me if they could come. You didn't consult me if I agreed to give up my bedroom. There is a big difference between informing and consulting Hope." I watched her process my words. I don't think she had ever thought about that difference. For her, just telling me things was enough. My opinion had never been an important part of the equation. "Diane, don't be like this. They're my parents. Where else are they going to sleep? In a hotel, at another relative's house, anywhere that isn't my bedroom, which you decided on without consulting me." Hope looked genuinely confused, as if I were speaking another language. "But you've always been so understanding about these things. I thought it wouldn't be a problem." "Of course it's a problem, Hope. The problem isn't your parents. The problem is that you two make decisions about my life as if I don't exist." At that moment, David arrived home from work. He walked into the house whistling like he always does when he's in a good mood. But he stopped short when he saw our faces. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking at Hope and then at me. "Your mom doesn't want my parents to stay in her room," Hope said. And I noticed how she changed the story. It was no longer that they had decided without consulting me. Now it was that I didn't want to help. "Mom," David said with that tired voice he uses when he thinks I'm being difficult. "It's just for a few days. Can't you be flexible, son?" I answered him. I have been flexible for 2 years. I have given up my space, my privacy, my routine. But this is too much. Too much. Hope raised her voice for the first time. Too much that my parents come to visit their daughter. Too much that we ask you for one small favor. It's not a small favor, Hope. It's my bedroom, my refuge, the only place in this house that I still feel is mine. David looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. "Mom, the whole house is yours. We just live here." "Really, son? When was the last time you consulted me before changing something in this house? When was the last time you took my opinion into account for any decision that affects my daily life?" An uncomfortable silence fell, because the answer was obvious. "Never." "Mom, don't be dramatic," David finally said. "We're just talking about a few days." "Sure, and after that, what, son? Are you going to decide it's more convenient for me to go live somewhere else? Are you going to decide I'm too old to live alone? Are you going to decide for me when I should go to the doctor? What clothes to wear? What food to eat? Hope and David looked at each other. I don't think they had ever considered those possibilities, but I saw them clearly. Once you start giving up your autonomy, it becomes easier and easier for others to make decisions for you. "Diane, I think you're exaggerating," Hope said. "We would never do that." "Hope, 2 days ago, I thought you would never make decisions about my bedroom without consulting me. And here we are." The doorbell rang at that exact moment. Hope turned pale. It must be my parents. I looked toward the door and then back at them. For the first time in years, I had their full attention. For the first time in years, my opinion mattered. Because there were finally consequences if they didn't take it into account. "Go answer the door," I told them. "I'm going to my bedroom. My bedroom which is going to stay my bedroom." Hope looked desperate. "Diane, please, what am I going to tell my parents? Tell them the truth." "Hope, that you didn't consult me before inviting them to stay in my bedroom, and because of that, there's nowhere to put them." David tried to mediate. "Mom, we can solve this another way. Maybe they can sleep in the living room." "Of course they can," I answered. "But that's a decision you have to make. I've already made mine." The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. "Go," I told them. "Your guests are waiting." When they went to open the door, I went to my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on my bed, trembling, not from fear, but from an emotion I hadn't felt in years. Empowerment. I heard voices in the living room. Hope explaining something in a nervous voice. David trying to calm the situation. Hope's parents asking questions. And me, for the first time in 2 years, feeling like I had control over my own life. That night, I didn't come out of my bedroom for dinner. I heard how they set up makeshift beds in the living room. I heard arguments in low voices. I heard Hope crying. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for her tears. The next day, when I got up early, as always, I found Hope's parents having breakfast in my kitchen. Linda and Arthur, older people like me, who greeted me with a forced politeness. "Good morning, Diane," Arthur said. "We hope we aren't causing any trouble with our visit." I looked at them and felt genuine compassion for them. It wasn't their fault they were in this uncomfortable situation. "Good morning," I replied. "There's no trouble. What there is a lack of communication that I hope gets resolved soon." Linda looked at me with curiosity. She was an intelligent woman. She could see there was more to this story than what she had been told. "Hope mentioned to us that you needed your bedroom last night," she said carefully. "Hope told you correctly," I replied. "It's my bedroom, in my house." I saw them exchange glances. I think they were beginning to understand that their children hadn't told them the whole truth about the situation. Hope came into the kitchen at that moment, her eyes swollen from crying and a sour look on her face. "Diane, can we talk in private?" "Of course," I said. "In my bedroom." I led her to my room and closed the door. Hope looked desperate, defeated. "Diane, my parents traveled all the way from Ohio to be here. They can't just go back." "They don't have to go back, Hope. They can stay, but not in my bedroom." "Then where—" "That is your problem to solve. You invited them without consulting me." Hope sat on my bed without permission, something that bothered me, but I decided to let it pass. "I don't understand why you're being so difficult. You were never like this before. I was never disrespected like this before." "Disrespected? But we just asked you for a favor." "Hope, you didn't ask me for anything. You informed me. There is a very big difference." She was quiet for a moment, processing my words. "And what do you want me to do now?" "I want you to understand that this is my house and that my opinion matters. I want you to understand that the next time you have plans that affect me, you consult me before making decisions. And my parents, find a hotel, find another place, but not at the expense of my comfort and my space." Hope stood up from my bed, her eyes full of tears. "I can't believe you're being so selfish." That word, selfish. It echoed in my head. 70 years of my life putting myself second, and now I was selfish for defending my own space. "Hope," I said with a calm that surprised me.
Being selfish would be asking you to leave my house. Defending my bedroom isn't selfishness, it's dignity. When she stormed out of my room, slamming the door, I was left alone with my thoughts. For the first time in years, I felt like the owner of my own life, and although I knew things were going to change in this house, I also knew it was time to show them that Diane wasn't the doormat they thought I was. The next few days were tense, but I held my ground. Hope's parents stayed in the living room for 3 days and then left for a hotel. Hope barely spoke to me. David tried to mediate, but I was no longer interested in negotiating. A week later, Hope finally approached me while I was watering my plants on the patio. "Diane," she said in a small voice, "I want to apologize." I looked at her, waiting for her to continue. "I didn't realize I was treating you so badly. I thought that since you never complained, you were okay with everything."
"Hope," I said, "not complaining doesn't mean I'm okay with everything. It means I have manners and respect for family harmony, but that doesn't mean I don't have limits." "Can we start over?" she asked. I looked at her for a long moment. I could see she was sincere, but I also knew that old habits die hard. "We can try," I said, "but with new rules." Hope nodded quickly. "The first rule is that any decision that directly affects me has to be consulted with me before it's made." "Yes, Diane." "The second rule is that my bedroom is my private space. I will not give it up again for any reason." "Understood." "And the third rule is that if something like this ever happens again, there will be no discussion. I will simply leave this house." Hope's eyes went wide. "You would leave?" "Without a second thought," I replied. "This is my house, but I would rather live in peace somewhere else than live like a freeloader in my own home." From that day on, things changed. Not completely, because years of habits don't change overnight, but noticeably. Hope began to ask my opinion before making decisions. David began to realize that his wife wasn't always right, and I began to feel that my voice mattered in my own house. But the most important thing I learned was that it's never too late to defend your dignity. At 70 years old, I finally understood that being good doesn't mean being submissive, and that respect isn't asked for. It's demanded. I thought that after our conversation on the patio, things were really going to get better. But I realized that changing years of habits isn't as easy as saying, "Yes, Diane," and promising to be different. The first few days after Hope apologized were strange. She made a very obvious effort to ask me things, but you could tell it was difficult for her. It was as if she had to remind herself constantly that I also had opinions that mattered. "Diane, is it okay with you if I change the curtains in the living room?" "Diane, what do you think if I invite my sister over for lunch on Sunday?" "Diane, do you agree if David and I go out on Saturday night?" At first, I was glad she was consulting me. But then I started to realize that she was doing it mechanically, as if it were just another task on her daily list. It wasn't genuine respect. It was fulfilling a requirement to avoid another conflict like the one with the bedroom. David, for his part, seemed relieved that everything had gone back to normal. For him, the problem was solved when Hope and I made peace. He didn't understand that what had happened was much deeper than a simple argument about where his in-laws would sleep. One afternoon, while I was preparing lunch, I heard Hope talking on the phone with one of her friends. It wasn't my intention to spy, but the kitchen is right next to the living room, and her voice was clear. "No, girl, she's already over her little tantrum," she told her friend. "You know how older women are. Sometimes they get difficult over any little thing, but I already talked to her and everything is fine." A tantrum. She had called my defense of my basic rights as the owner of my own home a tantrum. I felt as if I had been slapped. In that moment, I understood that Hope hadn't understood anything that had happened. For her, I had just thrown an old lady's fit, and it had passed after she handled me well. "Oh yeah, you're right," she continued. "Sometimes you have to treat them like little kids with patience until they forget what was bothering them." I stood frozen by the stove, the wooden spoon in my hand, feeling my eyes fill with tears. Not of sadness, but of a rage I didn't know how to handle. Is that how she saw me? As a little kid who had to be managed with patience until I forgot why I was upset. So of course I'm not going to say anything else about my parents coming to visit, Hope continued. Next time they come, I'll just put them in a hotel from the start. Why make her angry for no reason? And there it was, the truth. She hadn't understood that the problem wasn't where her parents stayed. The problem was that she had made decisions about my life without consulting me. But for Hope, the solution was simply to avoid the topic that had made me angry, not to change the way she treated me. That night at dinner, I watched my family with different eyes. David talked about his work while Hope nodded and made appropriate comments. Little Grace played with her food while chattering about school. Everything looked normal, harmonious, like the perfect family we had always pretended to be. But I couldn't pretend I didn't see the reality anymore. Hope didn't respect me. She managed me. She tolerated me. She treated me like a piece of furniture that sometimes got difficult, but with a little patience would go back to behaving. After dinner, while I was clearing the plates from the table, Hope approached me with a smile. "Diane, what do you think if we go to the market together tomorrow? It's been a while since we went out, just the two of us." I looked at her, trying to decipher if it was a genuine invitation or part of her strategy to manage me. "Why do you want us to go together?" I asked. "Well, just to spend time together, Diane, so we can talk, like before." "Like before? When was before? When I went to the market with you and carried the bags while you picked out everything without asking me what I wanted to eat. When I paid for things and you acted like you were doing me a favor by letting me tag along." "No, thank you," I said. "I'd rather go alone." I saw her face change. She wasn't used to me saying no to her invitations. "Why, Diane, are you still upset?" "I'm not upset, Hope. I simply prefer to do my shopping alone." She just stood there for a moment, as if she didn't know what to do with my answer. Finally, she went into the living room without another word. The next day I got up early, as always, and went to the market alone. Walking through the aisles without anyone telling me what to buy or what not to buy felt like a small freedom. I bought the vegetables that I liked, not the ones Hope liked. I bought fish instead of chicken because I was in the mood for fish. I bought flowers to decorate my bedroom because it had been a long time since I had flowers just for me. When I got back to the house, Hope was in the kitchen with a sour look on her face. "You already went to the market?" she asked, as if it wasn't obvious. "Yes," I replied, starting to put away my groceries. "And why didn't you wake me up? I told you I wanted to go with you." "Because I don't need company to go to the market, Hope. I've been going alone for 70 years. But I wanted to go with you." "Why?" The question threw her off. She was quiet for a moment, as if she'd never thought about the answer. "Well, just to keep you company." "I don't need you to keep me company out of obligation, Hope. If you want to go to the market, go. But don't pretend it's to spend time with me when we both know that's not true." Hope got offended. "What do you mean, pretend I do want to spend time with you?" "Oh, really? Then why did you never want to spend time with me before last week?" She didn't know what to answer because the answer was obvious. She had never wanted to spend time with me. Now she wanted to because she realized I could be difficult if she didn't keep me happy. That afternoon, while Hope was out picking up Grace from school, I started to remember what the first few months were like when they came to live in my house. David had lost his job and they couldn't pay the rent on their apartment. Hope was pregnant and they needed to save money. I opened the doors of my home to them without a second thought, because that's what a mother does when her son needs her. At first, Hope was nice to me. Not affectionate, but polite. She would thank me when I cooked. She would ask if I needed help with the house. She even bought me little gifts from time to time. But as the months went by and David got another job, things started to change. Hope was no longer the grateful daughter-in-law who had come to my house seeking refuge. She began to act as if she were the lady of the house, and I was just a tenant who had to adapt to her rules. First, it was small things. She changed the brand of detergent I used because she didn't like it. She moved my plants from where I had them because, according to her, they looked better somewhere else. She started deciding what we watched on TV during meals. When Grace was born, things got worse.
Hope became very territorial about everything related to the baby. She wouldn't let me hold her without supervision. She criticized the way I spoke to her. She said my advice on baby care was old-fashioned. But what hurt the most was seeing how David sided with his wife on everything. When I tried to talk to him about these changes, he would tell me that Hope was the mother and she had the right to decide how to care for her daughter. When I mentioned that I felt like a stranger in my own home, he told me it was my imagination that Hope loved me very much. Little by little, I gave up ground. I stopped giving my opinion on raising Grace. I stopped suggesting changes in the house. I stopped expressing my preferences about anything that could cause conflict. I became invisible in my own home. The lowest point came when Grace turned 2. Hope organized a party without consulting me. She invited her entire family and all her friends. She hired a clown, bought decorations, prepared a full menu, all in my house with my money, because obviously I paid for everything, but without my opinion mattering at all. The day of the party, I felt like a maid in my own home. Hope gave me orders about where to put things, how to serve the food, which dishes to use. Her relatives treated me like I was the servant she had hired to help with the party. That night, after everyone had left and I finished cleaning up the mess, I sat in my bedroom and cried. I cried for the strong woman I had been and that I had allowed to fade away. I cried for the years I had wasted trying to be the perfect mother-in-law. I cried for my son who no longer saw me as his mother, but as an obstacle to his wife's happiness. But I did nothing to change the situation. I kept putting up with it. I kept giving in. I kept being invisible. Until last week, when I finally said, no. Now remembering all that, I realized that one conversation on the patio and a half-hearted apology weren't going to change years of established dynamics. Hope hadn't changed. She had only learned to be more careful, to prevent me from becoming difficult again. That night at dinner, Hope casually mentioned that she had invited her sister Linda to lunch on Sunday. "Is that okay with you, Diane?" she added, remembering her promise to consult me. "Have you already invited her?" I asked. "Well, yes, but I told her I had to ask you first." There it was again. She hadn't consulted me before making the invitation. She was informing me after she had already made the decision, expecting me to just say yes to be nice. "And if I say no?" I asked. Hope looked uncomfortable. "Well, I already told her yes. It would be really weird to tell her she can't come now." "Then you aren't consulting me, Hope. You are asking me to validate a decision you already made." David chimed in. "Mom, it's just a family lunch. What's the problem?" "The problem, son, is that your wife promised to consult me before making decisions that affect me, but she keeps doing the same old thing." "But I did ask you," Hope protested. "You asked me after you already invited your sister. That's not consulting. That's informing." Hope got defensive. "So what do you want?" "For me to ask your permission for everything, like I'm a child. I want you to understand the difference between consulting and informing. Consulting is asking me before you make the decision. Informing is telling me what you already decided and expecting me to agree." Grace, who had been listening to the conversation without fully understanding what it was about, asked, "Why are you fighting?" "We're not fighting, sweetheart," I said. "We're just talking about how to make decisions as a family." Hope smiled at Grace. "Your grandmother is just being a little difficult, but she'll get over it." And those words hit me like a slap. After everything we had talked about, after her apologies, after her promises, she still saw my demand for respect as something I would just get over. I got up from the table without finishing my food. "Where are you going?" David asked. "To my bedroom," I replied, "to think about whether I really want to keep living in a house where my opinion doesn't matter and where defending my rights is considered being difficult." I left them at the table and went to my room. I closed the door and sat on my bed, shaking with anger and sadness. An hour later, someone knocked on my door. It was David. "Mom, can you open up? We need to talk." I opened the door and let him in. He sat in the chair by my dresser and looked at me with a worried face. "Mom, I think you're blowing things out of proportion." "You think so, son?" "Yes, Hope did ask you about Linda. Maybe not in the perfect way you wanted, but she did ask." "David, Do you understand the difference between consulting and informing? He was quiet for a moment. I think so. Then explain it to me. Well, consulting is asking you before doing something. Informing is telling you what was already done. Exactly. And what did your wife do? David sighed. She invited Linda, and then she asked you. So she informed me. She didn't consult me. But Mom, it's a small thing. Linda is family. It's not like she invited strangers. Son, it's not about who is coming to lunch. It's about your wife promising to change how she treats me, and she's not doing it. Mom, Rome wasn't built in a day. Give her time. How much time, David? Another 2 years, 5 years until I die. My son looked genuinely worried. Mom, what is it you really want? I want to be treated with respect in my own house. I want my opinion to matter. I want to feel like I'm part of this family, not a burden you have to tolerate. You are not a burden, Mom. Am I not? Then why does your wife talk about me as if I'm a difficult little kid that needs to be managed with patience? David looked confused. When did she say that? I told him about the phone conversation I had overheard. I saw his face change as I recounted his wife's exact words. Mom, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, son, because your wife knows perfectly well how to behave when you are present and how to behave when she's alone with me. David was silent for a long time, processing what I had told him. What do you want me to do? He finally asked. I want you to tell your wife that either she learns to treat me with genuine respect, not faked respect, or I am leaving this house. Mom, you can't leave. This is your house. Exactly, son. This is my house, and I would rather leave my house than continue to live like a freeloader in it. David left my bedroom with a very serious look on his face. I heard voices in the living room. Him and Hope, talking in low, tense voices. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone told me that my son was finally realizing that this was more serious than he had thought. The next day, Hope approached me while I was having breakfast. Diane, David told me what you overheard yesterday. I looked at her, waiting. I want to apologize. I shouldn't have spoken about you like that. No, Hope. You shouldn't have thought about me like that. You're right, and you're also right about Linda. I should have asked you before I invited her. And what are you going to do about it? Hope looked uncomfortable. Well, do you want me to call Linda and cancel? I don't want you to cancel anything, Hope. I want you to understand why what you did was wrong and for it to not happen again. Yes, I understand now. Do you really? Because this is the second time you've told me you understand, and the second time you've turned around and done the same thing. Hope turned red. It's hard to change the habits of years. I know. But I also know that if you really wanted to change, you would make the effort. I do want to change, Diane. Then prove it to me. Not with words, with actions. Hope nodded and left the kitchen. But I no longer had much hope that things would really change. I had seen this movie before. The apologies, the promises, the few days of different behavior, and then right back to the same old thing. That afternoon, I made a decision I had been avoiding for a long time. I went to my bedroom, pulled a small suitcase out of the closet, and started packing a few basic things. Not much, just the essentials for a few days. Then I went to the phone and dialed the number of my sister Susan, who lives in Chicago. Susan, I said to my sister when she answered the phone, can you do me a huge favor? Of course, Diane. Tell me what you need. Can I come and stay with you for a few days? I need to get out of here. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Susan and I have always been very close, but ever since she moved to Chicago after she got married, we only see each other on special occasions. Did something serious happen, Diane? Yes and no, I replied. It's not an emergency, but I need time to think away from this house. Is it because of Hope? Susan knew the situation well. During my visits to Chicago, I had told her about the things that happened in my house, though I always tried not to complain too much. But my sister is very smart and knew how to read between the lines. Among other things, I said, come whenever you want, Diane. You know my house is your house. Thank you, sister. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon. Tch.
When I hung up the phone, I felt a relief I hadn't experienced in years. Just knowing I had somewhere to go, that I wasn't trapped in this situation, gave me a feeling of freedom I had forgotten existed. I finished packing my small suitcase and hid it under my bed. I didn't want Hope or David to realize my plans until I was ready to leave. That night at dinner, I watched them as if it were the last time I would see them. Grace chattered about school with the typical excitement of a 5-year-old. David talked about an important project at work. Hope commented on plans for the weekend. Everything seemed normal, like an ordinary family eating dinner together. But I no longer felt part of that normality. I felt like a spectator watching a play I no longer wanted to be in. "Diane," Hope said, "what do you think about going to the baptism for my cousin Laura's baby on Saturday?" There it was again. She was consulting me, but from the way she said it, it was obvious she had already confirmed our attendance. "Have you already said we would go?" I asked. "Well, I told her we probably would, but that I had to ask you." "Hope," I said, tired, "that isn't consulting me, that is committing me and then asking me to validate your decision." "But I asked you. You asked me after you already gave an answer. Don't you see the difference?" David sighed. "Mom, this again." "Yes, son, this again. Because your wife keeps doing the same thing." Hope looked frustrated. "I don't know what else you want me to do. I did ask you. I want the next time someone invites you to something that includes me for you to tell them you need to consult with me before giving an answer. Then you ask me if I want to go, and only then do you confirm. And if you say no, what am I supposed to tell them? You'll tell them the truth, that your mother-in-law didn't want to go. But they'll think that's weird. And what's so weird about a 70-year-old woman not wanting to go to a party?" Hope had no answer for that, because there wasn't one. The truth was, she didn't want to look bad in front of her family for having a mother-in-law who wasn't totally submissive. "Fine," she said finally. "Next time I'll do what you said." But I didn't believe her anymore. I had heard that promise too many times. The next day I got up early as always, but this time with a different purpose. I prepared breakfast for the family, left food ready for lunch, and straightened up the house just as I did every day. But I knew it was the last time I would be doing it for a while. When David left for work, and Hope took Grace to school, I pulled my suitcase out from under the bed and put it by my bedroom door. Then I sat down at my desk and wrote a letter. My hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from the excitement of finally taking control of my life. "Dear David and Hope," I wrote, "by the time you read this letter, I will no longer be in the house. Don't worry about me. I am fine and I am safe. I just need time to think far away from here. For the last few years, I have tried to be the perfect mother-in-law and mother, always accommodating, always giving in, always putting family harmony above my own feelings. But I can't do it anymore. Hope, I know you promised me you would change, but promises without actions mean nothing. You have had multiple opportunities to prove that you genuinely respect me, and every time you go back to doing the same thing. David, you are my son, and I love you more than life itself, but I can no longer keep waiting for you to realize what is happening in your own home. Your wife does not respect me, and you allow that to continue. I don't know when I will be back or if I will be back. That will depend on whether you truly understand what has been wrong and are willing to change. This is my house, but I would rather be far away from my house than continue to feel like a stranger in it. With love, but also with sadness, Diane." I folded the letter and put it in an envelope with their names on it. I left it on the kitchen table where they would surely see it when they returned. I picked up my suitcase and walked out of the house that had been my home for more than 30 years. I walked to the corner and caught a taxi to the bus terminal. "Where to, ma'am?" the taxi driver asked. "The bus terminal," I replied. "I'm going to Chicago." During the taxi ride, I felt a mixture of emotions I didn't know how to handle. Sadness for leaving my home and my family, fear of the unknown, but above all, a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in years. At the terminal, I bought my ticket for the 2:00 p.m. bus. I had time, so I sat in the waiting area and watched the people passing by, families saying goodbye, people traveling for work, young people with big backpacks who looked excited about their adventures. I wondered when was the last time I had done something just because I wanted to do it without having to ask permission or consult with someone else. I couldn't remember. The trip to Chicago took 4 hours. The whole way I looked out the window watching the landscape change. I left behind the familiar places of my city and headed towards something new. At 70 years old, I was having my first adventure in decades. Susan was waiting for me at the Chicago terminal with a huge smile and open arms. "Diane," she said, hugging me tight, "I'm so glad you came." "Thank you for having me without asking questions," I replied. "The questions can wait. First, let's go home. You can rest, get something to eat, and then we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about." Susan's house is small but cozy. She's lived alone since she was widowed 5 years ago, and she has turned her home into a refuge full of plants, books, and beautiful memories. She set me up in the guest room, which has a window overlooking a small garden full of flowers. "You know what?" she said while helping me unpack. "It's been years since I had company in this house. This is going to be really good for me." That first night we talked until very late. I told her everything that had happened in the last few years without leaving out a single detail. Susan listened to me without interrupting, nodding from time to time, sighing at the appropriate moments. "Diane," she said when I finished my story, "why did you put up with it for so long?" "Because I thought it was what I had to do, because I thought that if I changed, if I adapted, if I gave in enough, things would get better." And did they? No, they got worse, because the more I gave in, the more they expected me to give in. Susan nodded. "You know what your mistake was?" "What?" "You confused being good with being a fool." Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning. She was right. I had confused kindness with submission, love with accommodation, family harmony with personal sacrifice. "And what am I going to do now?" I asked her. "Now you are going to rest. You are going to think. You are going to remember who you were before you became the perfect mother-in-law. And then you are going to decide what you want to do with the rest of your life." The first few days at Susan's house were strange. I woke up early out of habit, but I didn't have to rush to prepare breakfast for anyone. I didn't have to clean the house. I didn't have to plan meals. I didn't have to be attentive to the needs of others. At first, I felt guilty for not doing anything productive, but Susan helped me understand that resting was also productive, that taking care of myself was also important. "Diane," she said one morning while we were having a quiet breakfast in her garden, "when was the last time you did something just because you enjoyed it?" I thought about her question for a long time. "I don't remember," I finally answered. "What did you like to do before you got married?" "I like to read. I like to sew. I like to walk in the park. I like to go to the movies." "And why did you stop doing those things?" "Because I didn't have time, because I had to take care of David, then take care of the house, then take care of Hope and Grace. And who took care of you?" Another question with no answer. "Nobody took care of me. I was the one taking care of everyone else." "Diane," Susan said, taking my hand, "you are 70 years old. If you live to be 90, you have 20 years of life left. Are you going to spend them taking care of people who don't value you? Or are you going to spend them living for you?" That question haunted me for days. 20 years. It was a lot of time to waste, but it was also a lot of time to start over. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. David called me several times a day. First angry, then worried, then pleading. Hope had also called crying, asking for forgiveness, promising that things would be different. But I wasn't ready for those conversations. Every time the phone rang, I let it ring. Susan understood and never pressured me to answer. "When you're ready," she would say, "you'll know what you want to do." A week after arriving in Chicago, I finally answered one of David's calls. "Mom, thank God. We were so worried. Where are you?" "I'm fine, son. I'm with Susan." "Why did you leave like that? Why didn't you tell us anything? Because if I had told you, you would have convinced me to stay, and I needed to leave." "Mom, come home. We'll talk. We'll fix things." "What things are you going to fix, David?" "Well, everything that's bothering you." "I'm not bothered, son. I'm tired of not being respected in my own house.
Mom, Hope understands now. She's really sorry. How many times have you told me that already, David? He fell silent because he knew I was right. Hope isn't sorry for the way she's treated me. She's sorry for the consequences of treating me badly. What's the difference? The difference is that a person who is truly sorry changes their behavior. A person who only regrets the consequences just tries to convince you to come back so they can keep doing the same thing. David didn't know how to respond to that. Mom, when are you coming back? I don't know, son. Maybe never. You can't say that. It's your house. It's your family. Exactly. It is my house. And I have the right to decide if I want to live in it or not. And what's going to happen to us? You're going to learn to live without me solving all your problems. You're going to learn to value what you had when you had it. After that conversation, the calls became less frequent. I think David finally understood that I wasn't going to come back just because he asked me to. 2 more weeks passed. I had gotten used to the quiet routine of Susan's house. I woke up when I wanted, had a peaceful breakfast, read books I had wanted to read for years, walked in the nearby park, and helped Susan with things around the house. But only because I wanted to, not because it was my obligation. For the first time in decades, I felt like a complete person, not just an extension of other people's needs. One afternoon, while I was watering the plants in Susan's garden, my sister approached me with a serious face. Diane, I have to tell you something. What's wrong? David called me. Not you. Me. I froze the watering can in my hand. What did he say? He asked me to convince you to come back. He said Hope is a wreck, that Grace asks for you every day, that he doesn't know what to do. And what did you tell him? I told him that I wasn't going to convince you of anything, that you are an adult woman capable of making your own decisions. Thank you. But I also told him something else. What? I told him that if he really wanted you to come back, he had to do more than just apologize. He had to prove with actions that things were going to be different. And what did he say? He asked me what kind of actions. I told him he had to figure that out for himself. That night I couldn't sleep well. For the first time since I had left, I began to feel the absence of my house, of my bedroom, of my things. I also began to feel the absence of Grace. My granddaughter wasn't to blame for the problems between the adults, and I missed her terribly. But I knew I couldn't go back just because of nostalgia. If I went back, it had to be because things were really going to change. The next day, Susan and I went downtown to walk around. While we were having coffee in a cafe overlooking the park, my sister asked me a question that changed my perspective. Diane, do you want to go back to your house? Yes, I answered without hesitation. But I don't want to go back to the same situation. And if things don't change, and if Hope goes back to her old ways after a few months, then I'll leave again, but this time for good. Susan smiled. That's the right attitude. You're not the same Diane who puts up with everything anymore. Now you're the Diane who has options. She was right. The simple fact of knowing I could leave whenever I wanted gave me a power I had never had before. That night, I decided to call David. Mom, I'm so glad you called. Son, I've been thinking about everything that's happened. Have you decided when you're coming back? I might come back, David, but with conditions. What kind of conditions? First, I want Hope to write me a letter, not a text message, not a phone call. A handwritten letter where she explains to me exactly what she did wrong and how she plans to change. Okay, that can be done. Second, I want you two to find your own place. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mom, did you hear what I said? Yes, but why don't you want us in your house anymore? I love you, son, but I don't want to live with you anymore. I've discovered that I like living alone, making my own decisions, having my own space. But Mom, financially, that's going to be very difficult. Son, that's not my problem anymore. You are adults. You have jobs. You can solve your own financial problems. And what if we can't find a place quickly? Then you'll have to stay where you are while you look, but I am not coming back until you have concrete plans to leave. Mom, that's not fair.
You know what's not fair, David, that for 2 years your wife has treated me like a free live-in maid in my own home. That you allowed that to happen. That you made me feel like a stranger in the place I built. Mom? No, son. I've made my decision. Either you accept my conditions, or I stay here in Chicago and find my own place here. Would you really do that? In a heartbeat, I replied, and for the first time in my life I meant it. After hanging up, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in years, I was in control of the situation. For the first time in years, my decisions mattered. Susan hugged me. I'm proud of you, sister. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? I think you're doing what you should have done years ago. And I think that no matter what happens, you've already won. Why? Because you are not the same woman who left her house 3 weeks ago. Now you are a woman who knows her worth and isn't willing to accept anything less. She was right. No matter what happened next, I had already won. I had recovered my dignity, my voice, my power to choose. And for the first time in years, that was enough. 3 days after my conversation with David, a letter addressed to me arrived in the mail. Susan handed it to me with a curious smile. "It's from home," she said, "a woman's handwriting." I immediately recognized Hope's handwriting on the envelope. I sat in Susan's garden with a hot cup of tea and opened the letter with slightly trembling hands. "Dear Diane," the letter began, and I noticed immediately that for the first time in years, she didn't just call me mother-in-law. She included my name. I don't know where to begin this letter because admitting that I've been wrong for so long makes me feel so ashamed. But you deserve an honest explanation, so I'm going to try to write everything I feel. When David and I came to live in your house, I was pregnant and scared. We had no money, we had nowhere to go, and you opened your doors to us without hesitation. Instead of being grateful, I think I started to feel resentment because it wasn't my house. It was hard for me to accept that even though we lived there, it was still your home, your space, your rules. Instead of adapting with respect, I started to act as if it were my right to change things, to make them feel more like mine. I understand now that when you gave in to my whims, I interpreted it as weakness instead of kindness. I thought that if you didn't protest, it was because you agreed. It never occurred to me that maybe you were silencing your discomfort just to keep the peace. Worst of all, I started talking about you with my friends as if you were a burden, when the truth is that without you, we wouldn't have been able to get by. You took care of Grace when I had to work. You kept the house running. You paid for most of the expenses, and I, instead of valuing all that, complained that you were supervising me too much. When you left for the first few days, I thought it was an exaggeration, that you would get over it and come back maybe even apologizing. But as the weeks went by, I started to realize everything you did that I just took for granted. Grace cries for you every night. She asks me when Grandma is coming back, and I don't know what to tell her because I don't know if you're coming back. David is very quiet and sad. The house feels empty without you. But what hurts the most is realizing that I lost the chance to have a genuine relationship with you. Instead of treating you like the wise and generous woman you are, I treated you like an obstacle to my own comfort. I know that asking for forgiveness isn't enough, because I've done it before and then I behaved badly again. I know I need to prove with actions that I have really changed. That's why I want to tell you that David and I have already started looking for our own place. We found a small but nice apartment, and even though it will be hard financially, we know it's the right thing to do. We need to learn to be an independent family, and you need to get your peace and your space back. If you decide to come back, it won't be to keep living with us. It will be to get your house back, your life, your tranquility. We will come to visit you when you want us to, as it should be between family members who respect each other. I also want to promise you something, even though I know promises don't mean much coming from me anymore. If I am ever lucky enough for you to give me another chance, I am going to treat you as you deserve, with respect, with affection, and with the gratitude I should have shown you from the beginning. I don't know if you will forgive me, and I don't know if you will want to come back. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand everything I did wrong, and that if I could go back in time, I would do things very differently. We miss you very much, and we hope you are well. With genuine love and regret, Hope. P.S. Grace made you a drawing. She says it's you watering your favorite flowers. Inside the envelope, there was indeed a drawing made with crayons, where a figure with gray hair was smiling next to some colorful flowers. At the bottom, in a child's shaky handwriting, it said, "I love you, Grandma." I sat in the garden for a long time with the letter in my hands and tears running down my cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a complex emotion, a mix of relief, hope, and a soft sadness for all the time we had lost. Susan came over and sat next to me. "Good news?" she asked gently. "I think so," I replied, handing her the letter. My sister read it in silence, nodding from time to time. "This letter is very different from the apologies she's given you before," she said when she finished. "Yes, this time. It seems like she finally understood what she did wrong." "And what are you feeling?" "I feel like maybe, just maybe, it's worth trying one more time." That night, I called David. "Son, I received Hope's letter. What did you think?" "I thought it was honest, different from the other times. Mom, she really has changed. These days without you have been really hard on all of us. David, is it true that you're already looking for a place?" "Yes, Mom. We've already seen several apartments. There's one we really like, but we need to get the deposit together." "How much do you need?" "About $5,000. We're saving, but it's going to take a few months." I thought for a moment. $5,000 wasn't an impossible amount for me. I had my savings, my pension, and some small investments. "Son, if I lent you that money, when could you move? You would lend us the deposit." "It depends. When would you move?" "In 2 weeks, Mom. As soon as we have the money, we can sign the lease." "All right. I'll lend you the money." "Mom, thank you so much. But does that mean you're coming back?" "It means I'm coming back to my house after you are no longer living in it." "And when will we see you?" "When I want to see you. When you invite me to your house, like a normal family." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, do you not love us anymore?" "I love you more than life itself, David. But I don't want to live with you anymore. There's a very big difference." "Why?" "Because I've discovered that I like having my own space, making my own decisions, living at my own pace, and because I've learned that love and respect are not the same thing." "Do you respect us?" "I respect you as the independent adults that you are, and I expect you to respect me as the independent adult that I am." After hanging up, I told Susan about my decision. "Are you sure you want to go back?" she asked. "I'm sure I want to go back to my house. What I'm not sure about is if I'm going to stay." "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm going to go back. But if things don't work out, if Hope goes back to her old ways, I already know I have other options. I can come back here with you. I can find my own place somewhere else. I can do whatever I want." Susan smiled. "That's the difference. Before you would have gone back because you had no other choice. Now you're going back because you want to, but knowing you can leave whenever you want." "Exactly." The next few days were full of preparations. I transferred the money to David's account for the apartment deposit. I packed my few things. I bought some gifts for Grace. But the most important thing I did was sit down with Susan to plan my new life. "Sister," I said, "when I go back to my house, I want things to be different, not just in my relationship with Hope and David, but in my life in general. What do you want to change?" "I want to have hobbies. I want to make friends. I want to travel every now and then. I want to live for me, not just for others." "That sounds wonderful." "Will you help me? Houghton, come visit me often. Invite me to come back here whenever I want. Help me remember that I have options." "Of course, Diane. Always." The day I returned home, David came to pick me up from the bus terminal. He looked nervous, as if he didn't know what to expect from me. "Mom," he said when he saw me, "I'm so glad you're back." "Hello, son," I replied, giving him a hug. "How do you feel?" "I feel good. Different, but good." On the way home, David told me about the apartment they had chosen. "It's small, but it has 2 bedrooms, and it's in a safe area. Grace will have to change schools, but we found a good one nearby." "And when are you moving?" "The day after tomorrow. We have everything ready." When we arrived at my house, I noticed it looked different, tidier, cleaner. as if they had made a special effort to make it look good for my return. Hope came out to greet me with Grace. My granddaughter ran to me screaming, "Grandma!" and hung onto my neck as if she hadn't seen me in years. "I missed you so much, Grandma," she whispered in my ear. "I missed you too, my love," I replied, feeling my eyes fill with tears. Hope approached nervously. "Diane?" "Mrs. Diane," she corrected herself. "It's so good to have you back." "Hello, Hope," I said cordially, but without too much emotion. "Did you get my letter?" "Yes, I did. Thank you very much for taking the time to write it." "What did you think?" "I thought it was very honest. I can tell you thought a lot about what you wanted to say." Hope looked relieved but also nervous. "Diane, can we talk in private?" "Of course." We went into the living room and sat across from each other. Grace had gone to play in her room, and David was in the kitchen making coffee. "Diane," Hope began, "I want you to know that everything I wrote in the letter is true. I really understand how badly I treated you." "I'm glad to hear that, Hope." "I also want you to know that even though we're moving out, it's not because we don't want to be with you. It's because we understood that you need your space, and we need to learn to be independent." "That's very good. Will you forgive us? Will we be able to have a normal relationship?" I looked at her for a long moment. I could see she was sincere, that she was truly sorry, but I also knew that forgiving didn't mean forgetting, and that a normal relationship would have to be built little by little. "Hope," I said, "forgiveness isn't something that's given once and that's it. It's something that's built day by day, with actions, with mutual respect." "Does that mean there's hope?" "It means I'm willing to try, if you're willing to try too." "Yes, Diane, I want to try, but it has to be different this time. I can't go back to being the mother-in-law who just puts up with everything." "No, I understand. I want you to be the Diane who says what she thinks, who stands up for what she wants, who doesn't let herself be pushed around." Her words pleasantly surprised me. It was as if she had finally understood that a woman with character wasn't a threat, but someone worthy of respect. The next 2 days were strange but pleasant. Hope and David packed their things with the help of Grace, who was excited about her new bedroom. I helped them when they asked, but without taking control as I would have before. When it was time for them to move, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness to see my family leave, but also relief at getting my space back. "Grandma," Grace said to me as they loaded the last boxes onto the truck, "are you going to visit me at my new house?" "Of course, my love, and you can come visit me whenever you want." "Can we make cookies together like before?" "Of course we can." Hope came over to say goodbye. "Diane, thank you for everything, for lending us the money, for giving us another chance, for everything." "You're welcome, Hope. Take good care of Grace, and take care of yourselves. Can you come over for dinner on Sunday?" I looked at her, smiling. She had consulted me. She hadn't informed me. "I would love to," I replied. David was the last to say goodbye. "Mom, are you sure you'll be okay on your own?" "Son, I'm going to be better than okay. I'm going to be perfect. And if I need anything, I'll call you. But David, needing help every now and then is not the same as needing you to take care of me all the time." "I know, Mom. I get it now." "Really?" "Yes, I get that you're not a helpless old woman who needs others to make decisions for her. You're a strong woman who can take perfect care of herself." "Exactly, and I'm very glad you understand that." When they left, I stood in the doorway of my house watching the truck drive away. For the first time in years, I was completely alone in my home. I closed the door and walked through all the rooms. My house felt huge, silent, but also peaceful. It was mine again, completely mine. That night, I made dinner just for me. Food that I liked at the time I wanted watching the TV show I felt like watching. Then I took a long bath, put on my most comfortable pajamas, and sat in the living room to read a book. There was no noise of children playing, no conversations from other people on the TV, no one asking me to do anything, just silence, peace, and the delicious feeling of being at home with the most important person in the world, myself. On Sunday, I went to dinner at David and Hope's house. Their apartment was small but cozy, and you could tell they had made an effort to decorate it with care. Hope had prepared my favorite meal, and during the entire dinner she behaved in a completely different way. She asked my opinion on things. She told me stories about her work. She even asked my advice on how to decorate the living room. But the most important thing was that she treated me like a respected guest, not like a tolerated relative. Grace showed me her new bedroom, which she had decorated with some of her favorite toys and the drawings she had made for me. "Do you like my room, Grandma?" "I love it, sweetheart. I can see you fixed it up with a lot of care." "Can I come sleep over at your house on Friday?" I glanced at Hope to see her reaction. She nodded, smiling. "If your mom says yes, I would love that." That afternoon, when I returned to my house, I felt filled with a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. I had achieved what seemed impossible, keeping my family close but establishing clear boundaries. I had gotten my home back without losing the people I love. The following months were a time of adjustment and growth for everyone. Hope and I slowly developed a new relationship, one based on mutual respect instead of family obligation. David learned to value his mother as the independent woman I am not as an extension of his needs. And I learned that it's never too late to change the course of your life. At 70 years old, I discovered that I could be firm without being cruel, that I could love without completely sacrificing myself, and that I could be part of a family without losing my individual identity. Grace comes to visit me once a week, and those visits are sweeter than ever, because now they happen because we both want them to, not because it's my obligation to take care of her. Susan comes to visit me every couple of months, and I go to Chicago whenever I feel like traveling. I have my house, I have my family, I have my freedom, and I have my dignity. The most important lesson I learned is that true love includes respect. A family that loves you but doesn't respect you isn't really a healthy family. And defending your dignity doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who values herself. Now, when I see other women my age who put up with mistreatment or disrespect just to keep the peace in the family, I tell them my story. I tell them that it's never too late to say no, to set boundaries, to demand the treatment they deserve. Because sometimes the most powerful word you can say isn't yes out of obligation, it's no out of dignity. 6 months have passed since Hope and David moved into their own apartment, and I can say with total honesty that they have been the calmest and most satisfying months I have lived in years. I wake up every morning when my body decides to not when someone else needs me to be ready. I make my coffee just how I like it, strong with a pinch of cinnamon. And I sit in my garden to watch the sun rise while listening to the songs of the birds that have returned to nest in the peach tree. I've taken up habits I had abandoned without realizing it. I read in the afternoons something I hadn't done since they came to live with me. I water my plants with the patience they deserve, talking to them softly like my mother used to. I cook only what I'm in the mood for when I'm in the mood for it. And if one day I don't want to cook, I simply don't. Last week, Linda, my lifelong neighbor, said something to me that made me reflect a lot. "Diane, you look so different. Like, more, how do I say it? Like, more yourself." She was right. For the first time in years, I feel completely like Diane, not just David's mom, or Hope's mother-in-law, or Grace's grandma. I am all of those things, but I am also me. Yesterday afternoon, while I was arranging some flowers I cut from the garden, the phone rang. It was Hope. "Diane," she said with that respectful voice she uses with me now. "How are you?" "Very well." "Hope? And you all?" "Good too. Diane, I wanted to ask if we could come over for lunch on Sunday. It's been 2 weeks since we've seen you." I liked that she asked instead of assuming they could come. "Of course, I'd love that. What are you in the mood for me to make?" "Whatever you'd like, Diane. We'll bring dessert." After hanging up, I thought about how much things have changed. Before, family visits were a routine obligation where I cooked, served, cleaned, and they arrived as if it were their right. Now they are gatherings we all look forward to, where everyone contributes and no one takes anything for granted. Grace continues to be my weakness. She comes to spend the night with me every 2 weeks, and those are the sweetest nights of my new life. We make cookies together, we watch her favorite shows, and we talk about everything.
The difference is that now I'm not her mandatory babysitter. I'm her grandmother who enjoys every moment she spends with her because it's genuine. Last Sunday, while she was helping me mix the cookie dough, she asked me, "Grandma, why did you go to Chicago that one time?" The question took me by surprise. I didn't know Grace remembered that period or that she had understood what happened. Because sometimes my love big people need time to think about important things. And are you done thinking? Yes, I'm done. And what did you think about, I thought that I love my family very much, but that I also love myself very much? Grace nodded as if that were the most natural thing in the world. Children understand simple logic better than adults. A month ago, Susan came to visit me for a week. It was wonderful to have my sister at home, cooking together, talking late into the night, remembering stories from when we were young. But it was also a reminder that I now have the ability to enjoy company without sacrificing my autonomy. "Diane," Susan said to me the night before she went back to Chicago, "I'm so proud of you." Why? Because you achieved something that very few women of our generation managed to do. You kept your family without losing yourself. Her words resonated deeply with me. I had achieved the balance I thought was impossible. Yesterday, while walking through the market buying vegetables for Sunday's lunch, I ran into Mrs. Miller, an older lady who lives a few blocks away. I had seen her several times, but we had never really talked. "Excuse me," she said, approaching me. "Aren't you Mrs. Garcia?" "Yes, I'm Diane Garcia. I'm so pleased to meet you. I'm Mercedes Vasquez. I live in the blue house on the corner." We chatted for a bit, and I learned that she also lives alone since her husband passed, and that she also has adult children who sometimes treat her as if she can't manage on her own. "You know what, Diane," she said before we parted, "it makes me so happy to know there are other women like me who don't let themselves be pushed around. My daughter-in-law always tells me I'm too stubborn, but I say, I'm not stubborn, I have dignity." You are absolutely right, Mercedes. There is a big difference. We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to get coffee soon. I realized that I'm building my own friendships, relationships that exist independently of my family role. This morning, while watering the plants in the garden, I reflected on the whole journey I've been on. A year ago, if someone had told me that I was going to kick my son and daughter-in-law out of my house, that I was going to leave for Chicago all by myself, that I was going to set conditions for my return, I would not have believed them. But here I am at 70 years old, living the life I want to live, not the life that others expect me to live. The silence of my house is no longer the silence of forced loneliness. It is the silence of chosen peace. When I hear my own footsteps in the hallways, when the only sound is the turning of pages in the book I'm reading, when I can hear my own thoughts without interruption, I feel a fullness I didn't know was possible. Sometimes in the afternoons, I sit in the rocking chair that belonged to my mother, and I think about all the women of my generation who never learned to say no, women who spent their entire lives pleasing others, who died without having lived a single day for themselves. I don't judge them because I was almost one of them, but I feel grateful that I found my voice before it was too late. Next Sunday, when David, Hope, and Grace come over for lunch, they will find a woman who welcomes them with love, but also with self-respect. They will find a table set with care, but not with sacrifice. They will find a grandmother who enjoys their company because she chose to have it, not because she feels obligated to endure it. And when they leave at the end of the day, I will stay in my house, in my chosen silence, in my hard-won peace, knowing that true love does not require you to disappear as a person. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning a fight, but winning back your right to choose which fights are worth having. We at Elderly Stories are curious to know where this story reached. Where are you watching from? Comment below.